Hi, I'm Conlon Caesar here with the second installment of Inside Melrose School Committee. Today, I'm here with 3 school committee members who I'm going to ask to introduce themselves, and we're going to talk about the basics of what school committee is, how it works, the basics. Would you mind introducing yourself for the camera?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here. My name's Jen McAndrew.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Rozzi Thomas. I'm happy to be here too, and I'm in my first year as a school committee member.
Thank you, Conlon. My name is Elizabeth DeSelm. I'm in my 3rd year as a school committee member.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us today. First question I'm going to ask you guys is, as the school committee, what were the 3 areas of your oversight and responsibility in general?
Sure. Well, I'll start. So the school committee has 3 main areas in which we operate. The first has to do with budget and finance. So we set the, working as a group and with the mayor, we set the budget for the school district each year, and then we oversee the allocation of resources against that budget throughout the year. The second area has to do with overseeing, assessing the performance of the superintendent and through her to her team, and also if we were to be in a position to need a new superintendent for any reason, we would hire the new superintendent. And then the third area has to do with district-wide policy. So any policies that the school committee has purview over have to do with the district as a whole, operating across all of the schools.
So on top of those responsibilities, a lot of people think you have a lot of powers that you may not have, or a lot of responsibilities that then come from the school committee but often don't. What are some common misconceptions about the realm of the school committee?
We don't really have responsibility for hiring and firing of any staff. The only person we are evaluating and overseeing is the superintendent. So it's through her, and then she has all the responsibility around hiring and letting go of any staff, and as well as she's responsible for evaluating them. So, and her people are responsible for evaluating them. So I think that's a common misconception. So.
I'd say another common misconception is that we have some ability to increase the budget as it was given to us. The way the budget process works, right, it comes from City Hall, the mayor and the superintendent work out a number, and then that comes to us. The superintendent and her staff then allocate based on the needs and bring it to us, the school committee, and then we evaluate that and make sure it's in line with our priorities.
So on a more logistical side, how often do you guys find yourselves meeting?
We meet twice a month typically, the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. at the City Hall, the Aldermanic Chamber. During the summer we may meet a little less. During budget season we'll meet more often, but generally speaking, 2nd and 4th Tuesday of the month.
Do any of the various subcommittees, or how are you organized with the subcommittees? Do they meet more often, less often? Do you guys have different responsibilities compared to the school committee as a whole? How does that work?
So there are 3 subcommittees, but all members are part of the subcommittee, but each subcommittee has a chair and a vice chair. And so those subcommittees are finance and facilities, which has to do with budget and finances, as well as all of the buildings and facilities. And then the educational programs and policies committee, EP&P, and that has to do with a lot of the curriculum and instruction and policies related to teaching and learning. And then policy and planning, which really governs how the school committee itself operates, and the district-wide policies that it keeps those up to date and make sure that they're in compliance with state and federal law, and also oversees the evaluation process for the school, self-evaluation process for the school committee itself, so sort of how we're doing. And in terms of when subcommittees meet, it's really an ad hoc basis. Usually the chair and the vice chair will discuss between the meetings or meet with the superintendent or members of her team. It's really driven. It's driven by the agenda items that are coming before us and sort of what we're working on in that month.
And how during those subcommittees, you generally discuss the topics of the subcommittee, I imagine. But as the school committee as a whole, what do you discuss on your agenda normally?
It's a rolling agenda, and so you can kind of predict what's going to happen next based on what's happened in previous years and what you see coming up. But we always have a superintendent update. We almost always have warrants that we need to review in preparation for the meeting to approve them. And warrants are basically like, how does the money get spent within the district? And all members of the school committee review every small amount and large amount that goes through the warrant process. So that's how the money gets dispersed. And then we usually talk a lot about the budget, and that's like a 3 or 4 month period of time at the beginning of the year. And then we also review policies and hirings and people who have left. And we also, the best part of the meetings is when we have a little overview of individual schools, or when we have student leaders come in and talk to us, and we get to learn about what's happening at either the elementary schools, the middle schools, or the high schools. And the best part of the meetings, always. So.
Additionally, there's a 2-year program review that happens for each specific subject or curriculum subject matter. So right now we're in the process of going through both a history or social studies and a science in terms of the 2-year review. We're at different points, obviously.
And on that agenda, how can people outside of the school committee see that agenda, share their views, do that sort of stuff?
It's on the city website, and so there's a portal so you can see all the agendas. You can also, if you really are interested in this stuff, you can watch on television on Tuesday nights, and you're also welcome to come to those meetings. And there's a moment before our meeting it's an official part of the meeting, but there's an opportunity for everyone to have public comment to give their ideas and feedback about what's happening with the schools and the school committee.
All of those agendas, and then also the supporting documentation, like say for example reports that the superintendent might be putting into the record for that meeting, are posted the Friday before each Tuesday's meeting. And then if any folks who are watching are on Facebook, they could follow the Melrose School Committee on Facebook, and we also usually post it there after Friday in the lead up to the meeting, so you can review all of the documents that we're seeing as well.
And for those that can't watch it in real time, either in the chamber or on public access, you can actually go, MMTV, who does films our meetings, also shows it on Vimeo, Vimeo/MMTV3, and you'll get all of the government meetings that are televised.
So we also have one section of committee meetings sometimes that are at executive session, which those are private, those are not filmed, and we will report out on those afterwards according to the way the records have to be. They have to be made public, but oftentimes there's some things that we need to speak in private about, but it's very limited in terms of how much and or how long we do that for.
Sounds like exciting stuff. So these may be a little bit more personal questions just asked to you guys. I'm going to ask you each this same question, and you can respond. This is just your personal experience. As being on the school committee, what would you say has surprised you the most, and what have you found you learned since joining?
You can watch these meetings online. You can even sit in the chamber, and honestly, the feeling can be that it's kind of droll, it's kind of dry, but there's actually a lot of passion in the horseshoe there. As we're sitting there, everybody is very passionate and everyone is very open. Even though we may not agree on a topic, we're very willing to listen to each other and to debate a topic. And that doesn't always come through when you're watching it, either live or tape delay.
I've been surprised by how little money the school district gets. That was the biggest aha moment that kept happening over and over and over again. I went to a training with Jen for becoming a new school member, and I think it was in early January. And I began to see the numbers then, even though I'd looked at the budget prior to getting elected and after getting elected, but then you start thinking about it differently versus running for office versus sitting in those meetings and beginning to take responsibility for the overall picture of the schools. And I could not believe when I was at this initial training how low our numbers are in comparison to similar communities really close to Boston. So that I kept learning about that over and over and over again this first cycle for me. And I would say that it's astounding to me how much Melrose does with the dollars that it gets, the district, and it's frightening to think about what will happen if we don't figure this problem out as a whole city.
And I agree with what my colleagues have said completely. I would just add to that I don't know if this is necessarily a surprise, but certainly reinforced for me how invested in education this community is and how much so many groups of parents and boosters and supporters and students do for our schools and for our community at large. And I think you can really see that through some of the presentations that have been mentioned previously. When the schools come to present, you learn so much about what's going on, about the great things happening here in this building at Melrose High School, or all the way down to the preschoolers at the ECC, our English language learning programs. And it's a very vibrant, diverse district that's doing a lot of terrific things. And as Jen mentioned, we're doing it on essentially a shoestring budget. And I think that's just been really both concerning but also incredibly inspiring to me.
I want to pick up also on something that Elizabeth and Jen said, is that the passion that not only school committee members have and Superintendent Tamor, the thing that's been most remarkable is all the letters that we get and the parents coming in to meetings and really speaking up and taking charge of the next step that Melrose is going to take as a district and a city. And that's been like just so exciting to see and really heartening. Like, okay, it's not just us. A lot of us want the same thing. And it's just been really inspiring to see that.
So what would you say it was like to throw your hat in the ring and become a city volunteer, and what made you decide to do it in the first place?
Initially I jumped in and threw my hat in the ring in 2013 after it came to light that we hadn't spent money on curriculum materials over the last couple years, and I felt that was a huge oversight. And that inspired me to jump in and not just learn more about the budget, but become more proactive and maybe try to find a way to improve the fiscal finances that we were dealing with at the high school, the middle school, and the elementary schools. Personally, what was it like? There were lots of conversations at home about how I manage time with my family and keeping that work-life balance in addition to being a candidate and eventually a school committee member. But I find it to be a very rewarding experience. The interactions with the public, my colleagues, the staff here at the high school, middle school, at central administration. I've been in each of the buildings and I'm continually surprised and I always learn something.
I agree with all that, and I would add, I'm newly elected about a year ago, and I had had a lot of experience working in the schools as a volunteer or with the Melrose Education Foundation, which is a local nonprofit, and also in my professional career, I've worked for and with elected officials for most of my career. And so I had seen that side of it from a staffer perspective and volunteering and working on campaigns. And I think it was a little bit of a difficult choice to decide to be the candidate, but I'm really glad to do that. And I agree with Liz, the best part about running for office, and I definitely encourage everyone to, especially young people, to get involved, is the conversations you have with people when you're running. I mean, this is a volunteer position, so most of the work of the campaign is knocking on doors and talking to people, going to community meetings or events around Melrose, and learning about what's important to people and then trying to reflect that back in our work on the school committee. And I agree, it's incredibly rewarding, and I hope that more people decide to get involved that way.
I was a little worried about what was happening in the political world generally. And I was like, if I'm ever going to do this, my kids are in the school now. I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old at the Roosevelt. And I was like, if I'm ever going to do anything like this politically wise, and I've always loved politics and history, I should just do it. My friend Chris Gassatelli had served for 16 years, and she was after me for years. So, come on, you just got to do this, got to do this. So I did it, and I would say that I I ran a terrible, terrible campaign. Didn't know what I was doing, but I can handle a debate, and people are very kind in Melrose, and it's a very small city. So it doesn't take long with a couple of articles and whatnot. You can get your name out there quickly, and people were just so kind. And you know, it's amazing what your neighbors will do for you too, because I haven't lived in Melrose that many years, since 2006. But people just want to step up for you, and that gives you so much energy to keep trying and want to help out and want to do a good job for them because they had faith in me. So that was really inspiring, that part of it.
And if I could reinforce the volunteer.
Totally volunteer.
It's totally volunteer.
paid.
We get no stipend whatsoever. We are actually offered $30 a month for reimbursement if we
didn't know
wanted to
that.
print materials for the meeting.
Good
And
to
to my
know.
knowledge, nobody in the time that I've served has ever done that.
There's not that much money to take from.
Nope. The $30 is much better spent on
Yeah.
lunches here
Yeah.
than anywhere else.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for volunteering your time. It's certainly much appreciated over here at the schools. What would you say, especially last year, there have been a lot of changes in the city government, like the new mayor, you know, of course, new school committee members. What would you say that has been like for you guys, and what effects has it had on the city?
New mayors, a new mayor and new school committee members really brings fresh ideas and fresh perspectives to the school committee. Keep in mind that on the current school committee, only one person has served more than one term. And so there's a lot of fresh ideas, a lot of fresh perspectives, and a lot of open discussion that is really enlightening. So what's the change been like? The change has been, well, there's a little bit of tumultuousness that goes with it, obviously. And there's a learning curve, of course. But on the whole, it's been very positive. What has your experience been?
I agree. I mean, I think it's like most things. It's an opportunity and a challenge at the same time. It's wonderful working with Mayor Inferna. She's been a great addition to the school committee. Of course, she brings a lot of experience from her many years on the Board of Aldermen. We have a couple of new members of the Board of Aldermen also, and I agree with Liz. I think it's, you know, it's new ideas, new ways of looking at things. We have a lot of challenges, particularly around the budget, and I think we have a lot of great energy. We also are I feel really fortunate to be working with colleagues like Liz and our other colleagues who were previously elected. There's been a lot of good mentoring and help to get us up to speed. The superintendent and her team have spent a lot of time with each of us, you know, prepping us. There's just a lot of information to take in. It's kind of like being back in school, especially in the beginning. There's trainings and there's things to read, and that's been great. You know, it's a good opportunity to learn and hopefully to bring some new ideas to bear for the benefit of Melrose.
So, you know, we were elected in November, and then the new committee members, 3, me, myself, and Jen and John Abramsky, and we were then inaugurated in January, right around the same time Rob Dolan was saying he was probably going to take that job in Linfield. So it was like everything was new, and then there was a little bit of like House of Cards for who's the new mayor going to be. You know, there was a lot of change and a lot of uncertainty, and then we went into the budget season. So I think there was just like one thing after another for, I'd say, the first 6 months of the time that we were just getting adjusted to the new roles. So I don't think this coming year is going to be quite as tumultuous, but you never know. And so I think the learning for me has been about, you just don't know what's going to happen next. And that's true when you work in a school too, and I work in a school. So it's like, this is the way education is. It's a moving target, and we have to always be supporting it to be going in the right direction. But the local politics in Melrose have been really fascinating, and it's been great. It's been great to learn from Margaret Driscoll, from Superintendent Taymor, from my fellow committee members, and so I feel so lucky to have been mentored well so far. But it's been exciting. It's been a lot of surprises. So.
Well, thank you for that. We have a little bit of time left, so I wanted to take a couple questions from Mr. Daly's AP Gov class. The first question we had for you guys was, what is the school committee's main goal for the 2019 school year?
So I think it's just important to say at the outset that none of us speak for the whole committee, right? Those are deliberations and conversations that happen in the committee. But I do think it's fair to say that one important goal, at least from my perspective, is that we really need to engage the whole community of Melrose, and I mean everyone, from students through parents, with children in the schools, like we are, all the way, to every community member in Melrose, in a conversation about what does our school system look like now, what should it look like in the future, and what is it going to take for us to get there. And I mean in terms of resources and time and space and everything, because we are really at a critical point for this district. We have awesome, awesome opportunities ahead of us, but we also have real challenges around budget, which we've mentioned, but also growing enrollment, which is terrific, but also a challenge, and aging infrastructure and many other things. So I think that community-wide conversation about where are we going, and are we, prepared to move in that direction, and if not, why not, is going to be our main goal and our big opportunity for 2019.
And the budget is what the budget is. The challenges that are in front of us, we have to plan based on what we know now, and hope for a windfall, as it were. And so the challenges, the main goal for 2019, I would say, is maintaining, if not growing, the good work that's currently going on across the district, and mitigating any of the negative challenges that we're facing.
And I would say also to educate the whole community about how one hand washes the other. We have a really small city, and we have a very small pool of money, and the school district has needed to pull more and more out of the whole bucket because of all the mandates and the growing enrollment and all the curriculum needs. And so we have that, and then we have all the citywide services that need to be continued to be funded. And if you're giving more to this, then less goes to that. And so people just need to understand that the city and the district are managing their money really, really, really well. And so I think the conspiracy theories really need to be addressed, because there's some conspiracy theorists out there, and we just need to be like, so check your facts, please, because reasonable people will come to the same conclusion that we have. So
there's another one of these personal questions, but on a normal week, how often, you mentioned that the budget season may be a little bit heavier, but on a normal week, how many hours would you say you spend on the school committee, either at meetings or planning or just thinking stuff out?
I'm always on the clock. If I'm out in the public sphere, whether I'm on the sidelines for a sporting event or at the grocery store picking up a gallon of milk, or anywhere in between, I'm on the clock. I've been approached just about everywhere, and I've had conversations in some uncomfortable places. It just happens. How many hours? I can't tell you how many hours. The meeting itself maybe is only 2-3 hours. Add in a couple hours of prep, and maybe a conversation here or there to support that. So in terms of formal time, maybe you're only talking 10 hours in a 2-week span, in a normal non-budget cycle. But I mean, just last night and this morning, I've had a running text conversation with a constituent about a concern. And so I'm always on the clock.
I agree with that assessment. I think that's probably right in terms of, formal hours, and then there's, we try to meet regularly with the superintendent individually or about certain topics. Totally agree with Liz. Just before we came here, I was at the Roosevelt School where I have a 3rd grader, and I was doing lunch duty, and I had another parent asking me questions about something that, coming up for the school committee. So I think it's sort of informally, and we do that because we love doing that. I mean, that's why we're on the school committee, because we want to get feedback and hear what people are thinking about. And then, I do think it does wax and wane. And also, to harken back to Jen's earlier point, you never know what's going to come up. I mean, things do surprise us, and then they require, time dedicated to a certain issue or agenda item before us. So I do think you could probably quantify the standard hours, and then beyond that is kind of, who knows?
I'd say I'm not always on the clock, but I'm also kind of a lower profile than these two lovely ladies. So I'd say that you can make it a full-time job, and you can make it a little bit smaller. But it takes, if you want to do a good job, the weeks of the meetings, it's probably 6 to 10 hours, depending on how much time you need for prep. Really, it's about how quickly do you read, how many times have you reviewed this before, kind of thing. So once you've done it a few times, I think the amount of time that it takes goes down a little bit, but then there's the unpredictable things that happen with human nature. And but I'm not quite as involved in the schools just generally as both Liz and Jen are, so I don't have as much of a demand in my private life as I think they do. So.
Still sounds like you guys are all like mini Melrose celebrities.
My kids are convinced I know everyone. That's not true, but.
And I don't want to make it sound like either that, if you decide to run for local office, that it's going to take over your life in some crazy way. I mean, we all have, professional careers and robust family lives, and this is our important part of our civic life. But we do a lot of, different things. I'm sure we all have time to exercise and hang out with our friends too. So it's, part of it is doing things that you are doing anyway. Mm-hmm. And people use that as an opportunity to talk to you about issues they care about, which is great.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm glad we got through a bunch of questions, and I certainly learned some new things about the school committee. Thank you for joining us. And that's it for this episode of Inside Melrose Public Schools.